You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders and for coders about all aspects of life as a developer.
I'm Will, the curmudgeonly experienced developer.
And I'm Beej, the optimistic newbie developer. Welcome to what is going to be the final episode of Complete Developer Podcast. We wanted to produce one final episode before kind of closing everything out. I am going to be moving away, and we just don't think we can pull this off from a distance. So before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
All right, well, that didn't work very well. This isn't really the final episode. April Fools, y'all.
Hey, I kept a straight face through that.
You did, and I just completely...
You guys could not see him holding it back. It was funny.
Yeah, I didn't handle that very well at all.
He didn't know I was going to do that.
Yeah, he got me with that one, and you know it's actually the 21st of March when we're recording this, so like I wasn't ready.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, yeah. So what have I been fighting this week? Well, hang on. You threw me so bad that I can't even. Like I'm trying to recover.
Payback for some of the stuff you've done to me on here.
Yeah. Well, you know, of course, you know, as of the time this podcast is coming out, we had an episode come out yesterday, effectively, and so it's not terribly different than then.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. However, it being April 1st, it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the beginning of me actually implementing my New Year's resolutions, which I've been working for several months, you know, getting everything in place. I know you've been looking around here at the house. There's network wiring happening. There's fixing of websites. There's, you know, getting my backups like I wanted them to be. Just all the random crap that you don't want to deal with when you're actually trying to progress. I've been getting done the last, 3.5 months. So yeah, I'm just trying to, wrap up the last of it. Didn't quite hit the deadline.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And, just kind of remembering old friends long gone.
Yeah.
Today, I had a friend that died.
We both did.
Yeah. 10 years ago today.
Yeah.
As this, podcast airs, and it's you're just kind of looking back. And,
I believe that was 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's weird. It feels like nothing's changed, but, other than that. So, yeah, what do you have this week? Or what do you have today on the special podcast episode? Normally we have a week's worth of complaints to fit into this section, but we don't have that today.
Well, I have, I don't want to say been fighting interviews, but, I had an interesting one. I think I told you about this. What happened was HR didn't tell the developer that was interviewing me what he was interviewing me for.
Yeah.
So I was interviewing for a junior .NET position, which is where I'm at. He was their JavaScript front-end developer that was leaving. And so he was under the impression that he was interviewing me for his position. And
been there, done that.
Yeah. So we get started in the interview, and he starts asking questions, and the questions you ask a junior developer and the questions you ask a senior developer are pretty different.
Yeah.
The questions you ask a .NET developer and what you ask a JavaScript developer probably are not as different, but they are different. And so I would say about what should have been halfway through the interview, he just kind of stopped and said, I think you'd make a great junior developer, and I'd recommend you for that, but I just don't feel like I could recommend you for this position. And I was like, I'm applying to a junior developer position. Like, I know I'm a junior developer.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I thought you were applying for my job. I'm like, nope. He's like, oh, well, your answers make so much more sense. He's like, I have so much more respect for you now.
Yeah. And interviewing is terrible. It's the way that it's currently conducted is broken. Horribly.
I'll be honest with you. I'm getting sick of interviewing.
Yeah.
Part of the problem is I'll go in and I'll meet the team, and they'll be so awesome. I'm like, I want to work with these people, and then I don't get the job.
Yeah. Because, and it's very hard to get that.
And it's not like because of them. It's usually like they pick someone that's probably more qualified or has more experience or something like that. Most of the time it's been, I've gone into...
Or they hold out. I mean, a lot of these places, they, like for mid-level and junior developer positions, they hold out and try to get somebody that's desperate, or not really desperate, but they're very open to holding out for a very long time versus actually training someone. It's like, okay, I could teach this person to be where I want them to be, doing what I want them to do within 4 or 5 months, and they would be a reliable member of the team that grows with the team and provides value. But instead, I'm going to spend 8 months interviewing and not find anybody because, it's obnoxious. Like, if anybody needs help interviewing, and actually, if you're doing .NET and you're in the Nashville area, just like get a hold of me because I can help you. I can help you not suck at interviewing and actually evaluating the skill level of developers, because most of the tests that I've seen out there are horrible.
I remember a couple of weeks back you talked about one that you
and
did.
It was actually a pretty good test, and a whole bunch of people were failing it. And I was like, this test is legit. This is what I want to steal this idea.
Well,
if I ever have to do this.
You told me kind of about it, and then it was like a week or so later.
I made you do it.
Yeah, we had lunch with the recruiter that asked you to take this and just evaluate it for her. And you told her, you're like, I had him do it, and he passed it.
Yeah.
So
it's like, you're my beer swilling, neck bearded apprentice. And you did this, and people that are supposedly upper mid-level to senior developers are failing this. Like, what happened to get us where we are? Because wherever it is, we don't need to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to get into rant mode, but this is broken, and you can probably make some money solving this problem if you're an entrepreneur. So that's that.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I've been interviewing so much. I am ready to stop interviewing and to start working.
Yeah, and actually get something done and just
be part of a team. I mean, I've interviewed at so many places and met so many really awesome people. And I'm like, I want to get in there and to, get to know a group of people, get to learn from the senior developers and grow as a programmer. Because I kind of feel my growth is almost stunted because the
interaction. Well, it is.
Yeah.
Because that forces you to grow. It's sort of like somebody that lives with their parents, never goes to college, and they're living in mom and dad's basement, and they're 45.
Yeah.
Like, that person has not had the feedback loop necessary to grow. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're in danger of. Without a good team around you, without somebody going, hey, this code is crap. Because ultimately, you really aren't going to know it's crap when it's just your friends looking at it, because we're going to cut you slack. We're going to help you fix it.
You cut me slack?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I cut you less slack than most people.
Yeah, that's what
because
I thought.
I'm aware.
Tell me straightforward.
I'm aware of the tendency to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm not paying attention, I will cut you slack.
Yeah.
And I have to be vigilant for that to happen. Whereas somebody that doesn't have a decade and a half of friendship with you, or more than that at this point, they're not going to do that. And they're going to force you to grow.
That's true. Well, that's one thing we talked about with He Who Should Not Be Named, too, was you guys talked about...
Yeah, if you worked with us, we would be covering for you all the time, because it's not necessarily a natural reaction. It's not that you necessarily need to be babied, but socially we'll have that expectation and we won't notice it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's because I've known both of you for, 16 years now.
Yeah.
And we're all three very close friends. And so that, I knew that, you knew that, because we joked about it a few months back when I first started looking for a job. Because, you guys said, you're like, well, we thought about, seeing if we could get a junior developer position here, but we both decided that wouldn't be good for you. And I'm like, I wouldn't want to. Like, I love working with you guys. I think that would be awesome later on down the road.
Yeah.
But right now, I need to have other experiences, because I've got you and him as kind of my two primary examples of senior developers right now.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, that's the reason my dad made me work in a pet shop before I worked at his company. He's like, this is so you're not an idiot.
Yeah.
Because if you're the boss's kid,
you get away with a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And he's like, this is not going to fly. You're going to scrape gerbil poo out of cages for a while before you can even consider coming here. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's about time to...
It's time to roll that music and get into some pretty sweet IoTs.
So this episode, I'm going to steal Beej's thunder here a little bit. And with it being April the 1st, we need to have a little bit more whimsical thing. And I believe I found it. And we'll put a link in the show notes for this, but it is the IllumiBowl Toilet Nightlight. This is a motion-activated toilet nightlight available in multiple colors.
Okay.
That's a thing now.
Well, that definitely beats out my motorcycle nightlight that I found.
And, of course, it was available on Dig. It's sold out at the moment. I'm sure if you really want one bad, you probably can wait a little bit and they'll show back up. But it's actually kind of neat for people that are older, I guess. It turns off and on automatically by motion sensors. You can set the color to a color of your choice or to a rotating color mode. It's obviously easily cleaned. It actually apparently sits down in the tank or can sit alongside of it, and it's battery powered. So it's you don't have to plug it into main power, which is I guess kind of nice. This sort of thing. So yeah, here's our whimsical IoTs section, and this whole episode is going to be a little goofy, so this ought to be about right.
I am so totally going to get one and make it blue and sneak that into your bathroom at some point just to freak you out because I know you don't like blue light. So what are we talking about today?
I guess everybody noticed this episode came out on a Friday.
Yes, that's a little different, huh?
Yeah, well, it's April 1st, April Fool's Day, as it were. And this is sort of a special one-off episode, and this is a little bit more philosophical, I guess, than is typical. And we're going to kind of try to throw some curveballs at people and see if see what shakes out. So
like
this episode is 9 things a trickster would teach programmers if they could. And I guess let's kind of define a trickster. A trickster is an entity or character that you will see in old myths. You see this with, in historical sources. You see Coyote, you see Prometheus, you see Loki, right? Yeah. This is a character that does mischievous things to force people to grow.
Yeah, I've actually read a very interesting book. My minor was in philosophy, and I always had a fascination with mythology and just how that kind of related to the culture of the people. And
and if anybody's got interesting material on this, and we're going to have stuff in this episode that we're saying without saying.
Yeah.
And if you can puzzle it out, then you have some good sources. Send it to us privately.
Yeah. Shoot us an email, neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com.
Yeah. And so let's get into the discussion of why this is appropriate for April Fools. If you actually look at Norse mythology, Odin got his spear because of Loki. Thor got his hammer because of Loki.
Yeah.
Right. Like Asgard got its walls because of Loki. And that's also the story where Odin got his horse.
Yeah.
Right. So the trickster mythos, bring it in there. And this is probably the weirdest podcast episode that you will ever hear from us.
That's so true. Yeah.
But it's the idea of, hey, let's make people uncomfortable. Let's force them to grow. Mm-hmm. Let's throw things out there that are tricky, that somebody has to, you don't grow by somebody telling you something. You grow by figuring the pieces out. It's sort of like the whole idea of a Zen koan. It's something you say so that somebody has to think about it enough, and the thinking is what creates the growth, not the thing they just heard.
Yeah, exactly. And this, just for a little edification for our listeners, I wrote most of my papers in my philosophy classes after having a few beers and these kind of conversations with Will in college. Yeah.
So this has given you a little window into our twisted worldview, I guess, as far as it goes. And so these are the 9 things a trickster would teach programmers. And the first one is, I'll let Beej kick this one off, and then I'll explain it.
Numbers aren't things. They represent things. And the same is true with words.
Yeah. And so I'll give you a good example. You'll remember this from math class. How do you represent 1/3 as a number?
As a decimal?
Yeah.
0.33 repeating?
Yeah. So effectively, just representing it as a decimal without the little dash over the top, you can't represent 1/3.
No.
Right? In other words, the thing you're trying to represent and the symbol set you have to represent it don't match. There's a miss.
Yeah. Okay.
Pi is the same thing, right?
Yeah, we just recently had round Pi Day.
Yeah. So you can't represent pi in just, straight up decimal, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to have a hacky way to do that. And you approximate it. You go, okay, it's 22 over 7. And it's close enough for government work. Right. But actually representing it, it's not happening. Right? This is a matter of perception. Because what happens if you try to represent the number 10 in base pi?
I can think of it in base 2 or base 8.
Right. But if you base it off of
base
some
pi,
irrational
number,
how do you represent that? Well, the thing is probably that you can't. Here's the thing with numbers that's always important to remember is that numbers are not things. They represent things. Now, where this is an abstract mathematical concept, right?
Pi says to the square root of -1, get real.
And -1 says you're irrational.
Be rational.
Yeah. Right. Now, this concept from mathematics, people think that this doesn't map to the real world. The square root of -1 is another thing that we can't represent. It's a symbol for a thing. It's not the thing itself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
However, this is also true of our language. And if you dig at this at a deeper level, we use a lot of words which I like to refer to as weasel words. And this is words that can mean whatever you want them to mean. Mm-hmm. It's political season in America right now, because it's political season for it's basically you have elections every other year and there's 6 months of stuff actually maybe sort of happening. And then there's a year and a half of electoral politics. How many words, actually listen to a campaign debate, listen to a speech, listen to anything in either major side of the aisle. What you're going to mostly hear is weasel words. And what do I mean by a weasel word? A weasel word is a word that has no meaning. It's a word whose meaning is entirely subjective. Now, you'll run into this as a computer programmer as well. For instance, what does the word fast actually mean?
More than slow.
Yeah, it means better than slow. In other words, it is referential, not absolute.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the podcasts that I enjoy listening to, Coding Blocks. They were talking about going to present a new idea and get support for it, and or asking for a raise or stuff like that. And when they're saying that, they said, come in with real numbers on, how much has your work, your feature affected the company. Because if you say, well, it's brought in a lot of money.
Yeah, that's not anything.
What's a lot to Bill Gates?
Well, and you and I had this. Well, yeah, Bill Gates literally has enough money that it is not worth it for him, time-wise, to bend down and pick up a $100 bill.
Exactly. Yeah.
Think about that for just a minute. That is absolutely insane for anybody normal. But for him, now he'll probably pick it up because it's still a $100 bill and you have that reaction.
That's why he has that much money, because
he would pick it up.
Yeah.
But again, these words are very subjective, right? Words like fast, words like stable. Okay, let's say you're Facebook and you're building the Facebook API. I don't like to pick on these guys because they ruined my life at one point. But your definition of stable as a Facebook API developer is different than the definition of stable for, let's say that you live in a country that still has a space program. If you're building software that is in the space shuttle or in a rocket, your definition of stable versus a Facebook API developer who is move fast and break things, those are two completely different definitions, and you're using the same word. Right? These are weasel words. They don't have a meaning. They don't have something that is quantifiable. So point number one is to understand that words map semantically to the way they are perceived. They are not a thing. They are a map to a thing in a particular context.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is a complete developer?
Whatever we say for marketing. That's what because
he actually has good developer in the show notes, but I had to throw that in.
Well, what is it?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is marketing weasel word 101 to some degree. I mean, part of it is there's a limited number of domains available, and this was available.
That's true.
Let's not forget that. But words mean things. Words.
It was also our way of being able to have a podcast that was language agnostic and still angled to developers, but able to hit on non-development topics that affect developers.
Yeah.
So we chose a weasel word for the reason that it is a weasel word. or words. I mean, we use that, and it can be used.
So yeah, so just kind of kick that around your head a little bit, because there's implications. The longer you think about it, the more real reality gets. Okay, so point number 2, there's complexity all the way down. And so we're using an example of,
Web example.
Yeah, of hitting a website, right?
Yeah.
What do? I type, www.someobscenephrase.tumblr.com.
You forgot something.
Okay.
HTTPS://
Yeah.
You got to get that S in there nowadays.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
So you type something, and all of a sudden a web page comes up.
Hopefully,
right? There's complexity there. Like, it looks simple to you and me, but let's look under the covers here a little bit. And this is a sample that I saw somewhere and I cannot find. Somebody will probably point this out, that somebody's actually already pointed this out before. But
I've seen this one.
Yeah. Okay, you have an HTTP handshake going on between you and that web server, going, "Hey, I'm doing a GET request. Give me this thing. Oh, hey, this thing has all these things in it. Let me do GET requests to get those. I'm doing some process. I'm doing a post, probably for ad revenue, to say, hey, I just clicked on this, right? There's CPMs, right? So the process is already more complex. But then you go down a level and you go, hey, okay, I have HTTP. Well, what's going on there? Well, there's TCP handshake under there. There's a sign and there's an ACK. It's like, hey, who are you? Oh, here's your data, right? Here's the fact that, yes, I received what you said. There's that back and forth. But if you go down another level, there's an IP handshake under that. You go down another level, you have the IEEE 802.3U.
You skipped a level.
No, I said, oh, yeah, I completely skipped Ethernet. I am sorry about that. But, right, you have this, in anything in IT, you have a nesting level of complexity. What I want people to realize is, outside of IT, you still do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of things in IT can apply beyond.
And to go back to your philosophical arguments, this is the biggest problem that I have with the theory of Occam's razor. Mm-hmm. Because what I find that it does is people go, I have a simple solution to the problem. Here's the solution. Occam's razor says it's correct, which is okay when your solution is actually simple enough to encapsulate the problem space.
Unfortunately, it rarely is.
Yeah, a lot of people throw out simple solutions, and, like, go with any social group that you're actually around. What is the solution that the dumbest person in that group proposes? It's always a simple solution that is oversimplified. And then the second dumbest person has a solution that's overcomplicated. Occam's razor is supposed to deal with that second guy.
Yeah. It's more about not overcomplicating than simplifying.
Well, we have a tendency when we're explaining things to complicate things past us, like within.
We have a whole podcast about that. Come on.
Yeah. And
there you go. That's what complete developer means.
Right. So I don't know if you've ever heard the
decomplicating the complicated.
But, you keep going down, right? Yeah. So, like, let's say we're at the IEEE, 802.3U, right? But what's underneath that? Well, there's hardware level. Yeah, there's hardware level interpretations of signals, right? You have basically a waveform going over that is the communication. And they have to clean that waveform up. They have to do all these things to make that communication actually travel from point A to point B in a coherent manner. And it's very low level stuff. What do you have under that? Well, okay, I have a chip that's that's reading that. That's the bottom of the complexity. No, it isn't. Mm-hmm. Because how do you manufacture that chip? How do you keep the tolerances where that chip is actually functional and can be mass produced? That's a whole nother level under that. Like, it's literally, well, not literally. It's humorous, we throw words out like that, right? Yeah. And we go back to the whole weasel word thing, because literally has become one of those weasel words that doesn't mean what it means. But it's turtles.
Figuratively.
Yeah, it's figuratively turtles all the way down. And I don't know if you're familiar with this story, but there was, I forget, was it one of Aesop's fables where the woman is talking about, well, the thing that holds up the world is a giant turtle. It's like, well, what holds up the giant turtle? Well, there's another turtle. It's like, well, what holds up that turtle? It's like, no, I don't think you understand. It's turtles all the way down. Like, it's complexity all the way down. And where this comes in for software developers is a philosophical understanding that we deal with this by abstraction, right? We wrap this so that okay, well, this complexity is kind of shoved over here. It's sort of like cleaning a house. Like, you clean a house by what? You get rid of the dirt, and then you put things where they're not as obvious.
Yeah.
That's what abstraction is you're getting rid of the dirt and you're putting something where it's not a pain. And that's all you're doing. It's still there. It's one of those things to kind of think about more and more, and this is intended that you kind of pontificate on it a little bit, kind of mull it over, kind of kick it around for a little while and see what shakes out.
It's also a time bomb.
It is.
It's one of those things that think about it for a little bit and then you stop thinking about it.
And then 6 months from now, all of a sudden you'll be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Because
that's like
everything is complicated.
That's what I mean when I say a time bomb. It's something that we say that we kind of just put in the back of your head that 6 months.
Well, a trickster is somebody that throws bombs into the future.
That's true. That's true.
Like at a mental level.
Yeah.
Like, again, going back to the whole Norse mythology thing, the idea of Loki giving Thor his hammer and giving Odin his spear is because at Ragnarok, those things are needed.
Yeah.
He's affecting the outcome way out in the future by setting pieces in place now. So
the next point 3 we have is...
since you're a psychology guy.
Yeah. This one I actually have some personal stuff to say about. But you are not one person. You are a collection of interfaces. And the personal thing I have to say about this, it goes back to, it's probably about 8 to 10 years ago, there's a big bump in kind of pop psychology about the masks we wear. And I had a lot of my friends that really kind of got into that. And they kept telling me, you need to just like take off your masks and be your true self and stuff like that. I'm like, but I am my true self around you guys. I just emphasize different aspects of my true self. I don't put on a pretense around you to like Doctor Who when I'm with you and not talk about it with these other people. I pull out that aspect of me because you guys like Doctor Who and we talk about Doctor Who a lot. And I don't pull it out with these other guys because they're not into that. And that's kind of what this is getting at, is think about yourself and how you act around your spouse versus around your boss versus around your kids or your nieces and nephews. Or if you're even older than Will and myself, your grandkids. Now, think about the way you act around these different people and then compare this to object interfaces.
Yeah, because it's not that it's disingenuous to act differently around different people. It's that you're interacting with different people. Like,
exactly.
The interaction is the thing. The part of you that plugs into that interaction is part of the thing.
Yes. I mean, I wish back then that I had been still as big into computers because I could have used interfaces to explain that at the time. But I was just like, I'm not putting on a mask when I'm with you guys or when I'm with those other people. I'm pulling the aspects of myself out and
that are useful for the particular environment that you're in.
And they become more prominent. I'm Doctor Who geeky around my Doctor Who friends, and I'm not Doctor Who geeky around
me.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a Doctor Who geek. Yeah. Whereas if you talk about Star Wars,
which I do around you.
Yeah. Now, this is interesting for personal interactions, but also think about it philosophically about how it applies to things like object-oriented modeling. Modeling the interaction between two components, right? Mm-hmm. Or two discrete parts of a system. Is an object necessarily one thing? I know we have the single responsibility principle.
Yeah.
But kick this around in your head. Think about whether there's a single responsibility because it improves the ease of modeling something. In other words, getting all the pieces in your head, or whether it improves the accuracy of modeling, because those are two very different things. This is why stereotypes exist, by the way, is because it improves the ease of modeling, not the accuracy. So when you come at talking about stereotypes from a perspective of accuracy, you're addressing the wrong problem.
That makes so much sense. I mean, that's just like something I'd never thought about with the whole stereotyping thing.
Yeah, it's just a mental shortcut. And you're trying to say, well, this isn't accurate. And they're going, well, it's accurate enough.
It's not meant to be purely totally accurate. It's meant to be easy to understand then.
Yeah.
Huh, I never thought about it
it's
like that.
Pattern matching 101. And so that's why we still have stereotypes. Part of the reason is because we're not trying to get rid of them in the right way. And again, some of this episode is for you. And some of it's for me.
Yeah,
I'm throwing these things out. Okay, so
welcome to a Trickster episode.
Yeah, it's a Trickster episode. This is supposed to mess with your head. Let it.
Yeah.
You'll be better off for it. You'll probably get a headache, but it's okay, because
drink a beer and you'll feel better.
Yeah, drink 2, drink 5 for me, whatever. So point number 4: it is impossible to directly perceive anything. And to point this out to you, I want you to look around the room and find an object that is a solid. You got one? You actually don't, right? You can look like right to our right now, or to my right, to your left.
Yeah.
Again, perception is a server rack that's metal, right? This is supposedly a solid. If you actually looked at it at the subatomic level, it is mostly empty space. The reason it appears solid is because it is the interaction of electromagnetic fields. You got the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force, and gravity.
I would say there's nothing in here cold enough to be a true solid.
Right. Right. It's mostly empty space, and it is the interaction of fields. It's the same thing with light hitting your iris. Okay. That light that you're perceiving, by the time you've perceived it, it's gone. Same thing with sound. Same thing with everything. You're not perceiving something. You are getting effectively a reflection of what's actually happening, which most of the time works because phenomena continue.
And it's interesting because when I was reading through the show notes before the show, I read this and I thought, yeah, exactly. This is why testimonials and eyewitness accounts.
That's why they're crap.
Yeah, because people remember things differently. I mean, you think about your memory.
Yeah. I was taught in combative martial arts, and this is going to sound really skeezy, but if somebody is starting a fight with you and you can't get out, you yell, "Watch out, he's got a knife," because everybody will swear they saw a knife. Because people
was at that lesson. I remember that.
Yeah. And, that's skeezy as all get out, but it's true. People will remember things because they expect those things to be there, not because they were there. And the thing is no one ever directly perceives anything because there is signal latency just going down your nerves. Everything is past tense by the time you've processed that information. It's also very subjective. It's also heavily filtered. Other people may not have the same filters.
Yes.
You may not have the same filters between 2 different days. The implications are pretty dire for being able to model anything programmatically, for being able to automate anything programmatically. Well, the more you think about it, the more you realize just how inadequate.
It's all past tense by the time you know it happened.
Yeah, because happened is past tense.
Mm-hmm. That's why, like you were saying about perception, it's pattern matching. I mean, it's heavily dependent on pattern matching because things are continuous. They typically are. The problem is when the pattern matching misses.
Exactly. So, point number 5. And this is a bit of a corollary to that.
And point number 2.
Yeah. It's that you cannot actually put data out there in a way that is impossible. That it's impossible to perceive it wrong. Or where it can't be misinterpreted. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I think that's it's impossible to put anything out that can't be misinterpreted.
Right, because you're effectively building a signal, and then you're transmitting the signal.
Or to not use 2 negatives, anything you put out can and will be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
Was it Rule 34 of the internet?
Oh, yeah. That's a particularly terrible and not PG rule at all. But the idea here is that if I say something, I'm transmitting data. However, my ability to encode that to transmit it is influenced by my thought processes, my ability to say things and put them out there. Your ability to read that and actually get what I'm trying to say, what I mean to say, is not necessarily on point.
Well, this is a big issue with written communication.
Yeah.
I know I have run into a lot of times where my particular sense of humor has...
Yeah. Oh, you ticked my mom off like 15 years ago with something you said. And
that was verbal, and it...
Yeah. And the thing about it is different communication mechanisms carry a different percentage of the payload of data. So as you get to communication systems that carry less, like their actual ability to carry a volume of data decreases, people get angrier on each end. This is why in verbal face-to-face communications, there's very few fights. Telephone conversations, people can be a little bit angrier. Internet communications or text, they're even angrier. And if the only way that you can interact with another human being is your car horn, everybody's ticked off.
Yeah. Well, Will's mom and I get along great now. It was a joke I made that was misinterpreted back when we were in college.
Well, it was based off of your mental space where you were when you said it, and her mental space where she was when she heard it.
Yeah.
And those two things didn't match, and so offense was taken.
It's not none that you was
said,
intended. Or...
Yeah, because when you're kind of like me. When you decide to be offensive, you are.
Yeah.
And it's unmistakable.
Well, what's hilarious is your dad got the joke and
Yeah,
thought
he
it was hilarious.
He thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Because he was in a different mental space.
Yeah,
and so
he was.
it's the understanding that communication is a protocol and it's an imperfect one. This happens at all levels of programming.
Yeah. You guys know, I'm in the dating game, and when I'm texting someone, especially someone that I've just met or something, a lot of times I'll text something and then go, oh, by the way, my sense of humor doesn't always come out in text, so that was meant to be a joke.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, I get a reply back that, oh yeah, I got that it was a joke. I'm like, okay, good, because not everybody does.
Yeah.
But I have a, and that's the thing.
It's very easy to do that.
Especially when you can't, there's no
common handshake protocol.
Yeah.
Effectively. Like, there's
great
half
of
of one, and it mostly kind of works because we haven't all killed each other yet. But beyond that, it doesn't work very well.
Well, it's like when we're talking, you can hear the tone and tell, oh, be just being sarcastic. But
whereas if you do it over text,
it's you don't get that tone.
Yeah, and if you do it with a car horn, it's even worse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, but it goes back to the turtles all the way down.
It's the understanding that communication is lossy.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it effectively has compression as to the quality of the signal.
Exactly.
No matter how you express it, it's just how bad of an algorithm you want to choose. Now, you'll see the same thing programmatically when you interact with other people's systems. Because
we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
A lot.
Just kind of let that stew and bear in mind that that's in the background. Like, you may think that their system is interacting perfectly with yours. That's true until it isn't. And just think about how that relates to all your interpersonal interactions too, because this rule applies in both places. And again, this is why we're doing the Trickster episode. And these are things that help you grow as a person, not a programmer. That's what this episode's about.
Well, the things that help you grow as a person will help you grow as a programmer.
Yeah.
Because the better person you are, the better programmer you are.
Yeah. Because you can actually express things. You know these rules are there.
Yeah.
So point number 6 is that life is a series of feedback loops, not of linear relationships. And this is, to some degree, this is a little bit of a duh type thing. But effectively, most interactions that you have with people or other things are not linear. For instance, if you backstab somebody in a situation, it's not really a whole lot worse to backstab them twice. That relationship is non-linear. Or if you help somebody or you make somebody feel good about themselves, that's also not linear. This is why we have people that are in, multi-year long abusive relationships, is because the relationship between how they feel when they are mistreated and how they feel when they're treated well is not linear. If they're treated well once and they're treated badly twice, those things weigh differently depending on the person. This is also true typically in nature. You'll see a lot of things that can continue until they don't, and then they suddenly don't continue. This is true with just natural phenomena like earthquakes, for instance, right? You have forces on tectonic plates that are grinding against each other. They work. There's not a problem. There's nothing that happens on the surface until the force gets up to a certain level, and then all of a sudden everything goes to complete chaos and mountains fall down.
It's like a tangential curve.
Yeah. Or it's a sigmoid curve.
Sigmoid, yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
There's a whole lot of things that, interestingly enough, express themselves in these terms. They're not linear. And it's important to understand that as a human being, we're pretty bad about understanding this because we think, okay, hey, well, for instance, we have a very debt-fueled economy right now.
Yeah.
We're able to, Bernanke's basically blowing bubbles into the economy. That works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, how does that manifest? Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, that's not a good setup. It's a nonlinear relationship, however, because it worked until it didn't.
Yeah.
And when it didn't, it failed catastrophically, and it's because the underlying relationship was nonlinear. The problem...
Like my marriage.
Yeah, the problem here... Yeah, exactly. Human interactions the same thing. Network interactions. Like, things work until something fails, and it causes something else to fail, and you have a cascading failure off of one little bitty tiny thing. Okay, like for instance, if you have a liquid that's cool, when it's cool to a certain point, crystals form.
Yeah.
What happens around those crystals? Other crystals. all of a sudden you have freezing. And it happens very, very quickly. It's a phase change type thing. And human beings are very bad at predicting this. The human mind is terrible at predicting nonlinearity. This is why people have massive loans that they've taken out, because they don't think about things in a nonlinear fashion. They think a linear growth curve.
Yeah.
And, really this comes down to our ability to actually express this in terms that we can understand. Our language roots, it doesn't matter what language, the root of whatever language you speak was developed during a time when people were hunting animals with pointy sticks. Unless it's like Esperanto, which nobody speaks. Like, our languages are very old. Our ability to express things is developed around that hunter-gatherer mindset. And we're in a civilization that has global communication, space travel, and increasingly better AI. There's a lot of things that we have to deal with right now that we can't express linguistically very well.
Unless you're in Florida. Did you hear about that?
No.
Florida has now classified programming languages as foreign languages. I need to do some research on this, and I'm going to contact our friend that's a professor down there. But I think this is so that college students can get foreign language credit.
Well, and this is something you'll actually notice. Like, if you, a lot of foreign languages, they have different phrases they use. Like, for instance, if you use...
Like idioms?
Not just idioms. Like, idioms are one thing, but just the constructs of the language. For instance, you have Northern European languages that have different words that they use, like for groups of people. If you have a group of all males, it's one word. If it's a group of all females, it's another word. And if it's a mixed group, it's another word. If you're addressing the group.
Well, that comes primarily out of... languages like the Romanic languages that
Germanic, especially.
Or Germanic that they don't really have a gender neutral pronoun.
Right.
It's like physical items, like this bottle of beer would be considered she or something because it is a female.
Right. Well,
pronoun.
Icelandic has got a lot of those. Old English had a lot of those kind of things. German does as well. And you have different things and people go, okay, well, this isn't that bad. Well, it isn't bad, but it makes you track different pieces of information just so that you can communicate. And now you're aware of that information because there's things that you can effectively say in one language that you cannot say in another language. In other words, the mapping is no longer one-to-one.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because if I'm addressing let's say I'm in Reykjavik and I'm addressing a all-girls group, the words I would use in Icelandic are different than a group, what I would say to an all-male group. However, if you translate both speeches to English,
they're the same.
It's the same. And then if I try to translate it back to Icelandic, now it misses.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. That's like the old joke about, you take a phrase and you go to Google Translate and you translate it to German and then to French and then back to English and it's like,
and then laugh.
Yeah.
Because so much information is lost. Mm-hmm. We have this problem with describing nonlinear systems where most languages really haven't caught up. And English definitely has not caught up. Mm-hmm. Because when you try to express things, like if you're sitting around drinking beers with your friends, trying to express nonlinearity, especially things that are past, x squared complexity, you can't express this in our language. So, it's not there.
Yeah.
You use the language of mathematics. That's why they have all the symbols and things that they have, is because the language for describing it and understanding this in a intuitive fashion, it's not there. That's why they had to do that. Because otherwise we would just say, oh yeah, it's, it varies with whatever. Like, you can say this with relatively linear relationships. You can say it up to a certain level, but you get to a certain point and you got nothing. The language doesn't have it.
Yeah.
We're a people that has a language built around, hey, there's buffalo over the next ridge, and all of a sudden we're launching rockets at Mars.
I was say, have you seen The Martian?
I have not seen it yet. Do not ruin it.
Well, you've not read the book?
No.
Good book.
It's in my queue. But so be thinking about how life is a sequence of, feedback loops and nonlinear relationships, because sometimes these things don't matter until they really matter. Until they're, they don't matter until they're the only thing that matters. So just kind of kick that around your head. Let that sit there, mull on it. Okay. Point number 7. The universe doesn't care.
But I do.
Right.
Not really.
Sorry.
Sorry.
This can be good or bad.
Yeah, it really can.
Based on your worldview, because saying, oh, the universe doesn't care about me. I'm just this meat sack living on a, blue planet 93 million miles from a sun that's going to burn out and explode at some point. That's pretty horrible. But the other thing is the universe doesn't care. I can make my way.
And the big thing here to understand is this isn't a religious statement.
No, it really isn't. And it's not an irreligious statement either. It's not nihilistic. It's just the understanding of this is my place in the cosmos. I can do the things I can do. Mm-hmm. And it's, there's the individual morality line and the understanding that, okay, if you believe that somebody's out there and is watching you and doesn't like this or doesn't like that, you can choose that direction. But what this means is you have total freedom. You also have the freedom to accept consequences.
But the freedom to accept consequences or
the necessity?
Yeah.
Because the fact is what you do has consequences. And the universe doesn't care. Like the mechanics of how space-time works don't care why you did something. There's consequences for it, right? The universe doesn't care that you painted your barn red. However, the reason you painted your barn red is because red paint is cheap. The reason red paint is cheap is because there's lots of iron. And the reason there's lots of iron is because the way stars die. It has nothing to do with you.
Yep.
You're just mixing stuff up and slathering something and you on a board, and that's what you're doing. The larger universe doesn't care, right? The universe is size.
I'm thinking of my grandmother's toenails.
The size of the universe, let's get back to that, is
it's big.
It's pretty freaking massive. Like it's up to the speed of light.
Times the number of seconds since the Big Bang.
Times 2 in, any direction from wherever that happened. And, there's that whole physical thing of, okay, it did expand into space. Space expanded, mm-hmm. which is kind of mental to start trying to think about. But it's the fact that odds are pretty good that a bunch of bipedal hairless apes are mostly hairless apes. Beige was tugging his beard going, hairless? Really? But a bunch of bipedal, less hairy apes hanging out on a ball of rock around a star, on the edge of a galaxy, one of billions of galaxies, probably doesn't matter that much, like in the much larger scheme of things. And this can either give you humility or it can give you the ability to go, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do whatever I want to do and make my life better or worse because this isn't the only thing there is.
Well, that's that reminds me of the first Men in Black movie where when Will Smith's character is starting out and it's like, the twins keep us on a 36-hour-a-day schedule. Like that either drives you crazy or you get used to it.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what you're saying.
That's what the universe is.
It either drives you crazy or you get used to it.
Yeah.
Which personally, I think
And neither one matters to the universe.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so point number 8, and we're kind of running down on time here because these are things that you have to kick around. And I think this comes from Alan Moore. And you can look him up if you're interested in this. But the idea is that no map is big enough to describe the territory accurately.
Alan Moore, The Watchmen?
No. I read his stuff, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
But the idea here is that abstractions exist because they simplify things. They also leak because they're simplifications. And I'll give you an example of this, just philosophically looking computer stuff. I access a file on the hard drive, right?
Yeah, you did Watchmen.
Okay.
And V for Vendetta and From Hell.
Different Alan Moore then.
Okay.
But if I access a file on the hard drive, right? I have this path. Here's the file.
Yeah.
I read the file in. There's a lot of interactions happening under the covers, but those are abstracted by the operating system. Now, let's say if I access a file across the network, what happens? I'm accessing it with a path. I'm getting that data. However, now on top of whatever abstractions the operating system has put there, there's also the network layer, right? I can access this file as if it were local without too many problems until there are problems. The point of this is the underlying structure here is that any simplification that you do of something loses data. Sometimes that's data that you actually need. For instance, the fact that, hey, I'm accessing this file across the network means that I can't access it with the timings that I used to have. I can't go, I'm going to be able to pull this in 1 millisecond because it's halfway across the planet. No, you're not, right? This is kind of something that's a little bit hard for programmers to get their head around, but abstractions always leak because they're simplifications of what's actually going on. Corollary to this is that there's literally nothing that you're doing in this field that's not an abstraction. Okay, computer science is built across the top of electrical engineering, electronics. It's built across the top of materials science and mathematics. All those things underlie this field, and if you go deep enough, you'll get into one of those other things because we're wrapping them. We're not overcoming them. We're just making them into a form that we can deal with. So when you're thinking about your code and what it's doing, try to bear that in mind, because it doesn't matter until it's the only thing that matters. And the last point is kind of a final philosophical thing that I'm going to throw out there. And this is in the form of a theorem, and we're just going to kind of put it out there. I'm sure somebody's actually expressed this in a more eloquent mathematical sense, but this is an intuitive one. It's that if A changes B and the change in B can be observed from C, then there's effectively a communication channel between A and C by way of B. In other words, if I write something on a board and you can see the board, I just communicated with you. This comes into a lot of interesting, odd things, right? Because if I get a copy of your bank statement, I can tell who you are. Not who you say you are, but who you are. Because I can see what your priorities are, right? Because they're reflected in this statement. This is also very, very important for computer security. Okay, for instance, I'm going to use a sample of, SQL injection. Because security is one of those things where disclosure of information unintentionally can lead to catastrophic results. So let's say I have a login form, right? And there's a guy named O'Malley that's logging in. And he puts the single quote character in his username when he logs in. And the system breaks with a SQL error. What does that tell you? It tells you that you have a SQL injection opportunity, because I can close out a quote with a single quote and something happens that breaks the system.
Oh, little tables.
Yeah, little Bobby Tables problem. That's exactly what that is, right? Because as a user, I did something and this other system reacted and it was observable to me. Mm-hmm. Right? There's effectively a communication channel between me and the database now, directly through this proxy, effectively, that happens to be the web server. You're going to see this kind of stuff a lot. Sometimes it will actually help you, because you can look at something and go, okay, what's the knockoff effect of this thing? Like, this thing's hard to measure, but this other thing that's the result of it, I can measure, and it will help you computationally as far as figuring out heuristics for what's going on. But it's also true in a security perspective that, hey, you leaked information. That's really, really bad, because what it does is it shows, hey, here's a way into the system. Does that kind of make a little bit of sense? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, these are the 9 points that, like, if a trickster, if a Prometheus, if a Loki showed up in computer science right now and taught a class, here's the stuff he'd prank you over to make you grow. So I guess to summarize, we had 9 things that a trickster would teach you if they were teaching a programming class. And starting from the top, numbers are not things. They represent things. The same is true of most words.
I would say the same is true of all words.
Same is true of everything that you perceive.
Yeah, really.
Because ultimately we encode them in words most of the time. And, because otherwise, how do we put them back out? And how do we receive them?
There's complexity all the way down, really.
Yeah, in everything.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yep. Number 3 is you're not one person.
No, you're a collection of interfaces.
Yeah. You're not a thing, you're a cloud of things, as it were.
That's a good way to put it.
Right.
I like it.
And, really, like, the more you look into biology, you start to realize that, hey, I'm me, but I'm also my gut flora. I'm also the stuff that's living on my skin. I'm also the interaction of myself with my environment, with the people around me.
You really want to blow your mind? Think about this. Mitochondria have their own DNA.
Yeah. Well, think about this. You have a whole bunch of different genes that are interacting to make you.
Oh, yeah.
Without the mitochondrial DNA thing.
Yeah.
It's those genes are the things that are evolving, and that creates a level of complexity that becomes the thing that becomes you. Like,
I'm just saying, you're talking about things that are extracellular. Mitochondria they're basically like,
they're inside the cell, and it's basically another organism.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's started living there. And it's really the same thing with the interaction of the other genes that are in the nucleus as well.
Yeah.
Like, you're not what you think you are. Mm-hmm. You're a cloud of things, some of which you may actually be accurate about when you're just self-describing, but that doesn't make it what it is.
And taking that same concept and pushing it beyond yourself, it's impossible to directly perceive anything.
Yeah.
Because if you are not just one person,
neither is anybody else. Neither is anything else.
Yeah.
So point number 5, it's impossible to put anything out in a way that can't be misinterpreted. This is kind of a corollary to the other thing, is that your ability to encode something is limited. It's a lossy compression algorithm, as is your ability to decode. You're always going to lose data when you communicate it.
Oh, yeah. And 6, life, it's a series of feedback loops. It's not linear relationships, no matter how much you want it to be.
Well, it'd be so much easier to model.
Oh, yeah.
And everything would just work like they tell us in the Disney movies, right?
And the universe would care, which, point number 7, it doesn't.
Yeah, it absolutely doesn't. This can either be, this can be absolute condemnation of human beings, or it can be freeing. And it's really your choice. Number 8, no map is big enough to describe the territory accurately.
Because if it was, it would be the territory.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Or you'd rather live there.
Yeah.
Because it's got neat little lines.
Mm-hmm.
And, abstractions work because they're simplifications for a particular case.
Yeah.
That's why we abstract things, because it makes it easier to understand. We have chemistry because the physics of tiny particles is a problem. We have evolution, and we have life, our understanding of life, because, hey, biochemistry is pretty darn ugly to understand over 1 million years, and all that. We have the theory of civilization because, hey, life is also kind of complex to understand when you start having animals that can that can understand themselves.
So what you're saying is, when it comes to life, it's complex all the way down.
Yeah. Well, we kind of hit this point, like all these things tie together.
They really do. They really do. And finally, speaking of tying together, if A changes B, and the change in B can be observed from C, then effectively there's a communication channel between A and C via B.
Yeah. And this is the way all of our networking stuff works, right? It's like I can excite electrons on one end of a wire, and we have an effect that happens at the other end of the wire.
Yeah.
We have communication. It's because I have changed state here on this thing from this thing, and this other thing is reading that by a sequence of events. So, that's our April Fool's episode. We're just throwing this out here to mess with some heads. And
speaking of messing with heads, since you stole my thunder,
fire from the gods. No, wait, that was Prometheus. My bad.
I was gonna say my thunder with IoTs. I'm taking yours for tricks of the trade.
What kind of trick do you have, Trickster?
Giving technical support. This isn't something a lot of us have to do as programmers and developers, but we do occasionally get the call from grandma asking for help with her computer, or every now and then have to help out. But this is more of a mindset than actually do this. But when helping someone fix their computer over the phone, and you want to see if all the cables are plugged in correctly, don't ask, have you checked to see if the cables are plugged in? Because honestly, the person's going to say, duh, do you think I'm a moron? Of course the cables are plugged in correctly. Instead, use a little psychology. Ask them to remove the cable, to blow the dust out of the connector like they used to do on their old 8-bit Nintendo, and then plug it back in. A lot of times a customer will reply, hey, it's working now.
Yeah. I've used this actually in a very similar fashion in a situation where a customer was sure that they'd paid a bill and they hadn't, and the system showed that they hadn't. Yeah. And they were going round and round, and I said, okay, well, can you find that check number so that I can get a hold of the bank and we can try to trace this and figure out where things fell down?
Yeah.
And then they go back and they go, okay, let me find that check number, and then they can't find it and they realize they didn't pay. Uh-huh. You're giving them a place to save face.
Yes, you really are. You're giving them a place to save face, and you're not making them look stupid.
Yeah, well, it's not adversarial.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole point here is, when you get adversarial with them, they're going to come back adversarial with
you. Yeah, well, you only do adversarial when you want an adversary.
Yeah, exactly.
If
If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at www.CompleteDeveloperPodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.